Mesopotamia birthed the first version of the Holy Scripture. The Israelites then crafted the Old Testament. History was erased before the final version was ever presented. The Bible. The Holy Book's deleted stories change everything you thought you knew. We often forget that the Bible wasn't written by a single person, but by hordes and hordes of people from different eras, different ages, and different lands. It was originally inspired by the stories of ancient Mesopotamia, taking us back to what is now modern-day Iraq, or the ancient land between the Tigris and Euphrates. It all begins with the Sumerians, who settled in this region around 3100 BCE and developed cuneiform writing, one of the earliest known scripts. This writing system enabled the recording of myths, hymns, and epics that explored themes of creation, divine hierarchy, and human existence. And here we come to the first, so to speak, proof that these writings inspired later Christians. The Epic of Gilgamesh, a detailed and well-preserved Mesopotamian story, mentions a flood that strikingly parallels the biblical tale of Noah's Ark. Both stories center on a great flood sent by the divine to cleanse the earth, with one man chosen to build a massive vessel and preserve life. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim receives instructions from the god Enki to construct a boat, bring his family and animals aboard, and survive the deluge. Similarly, in the Bible, Noah is commanded by God to build an ark, save his family, and gather pairs of animals. After the waters recede in both accounts, the survivors offer sacrifices of gratitude to the divine, marking the stories as not only tales of destruction, but also of renewal and favor with the gods. In past videos featured on our channel, we talked about this topic in greater detail, so we won't linger too long here. But it's impossible not to mention such significant religious parallels. The story of the Holy Scriptures continues to evolve, ultimately giving us the Bible as we know it today. The Old Testament is the first recognized section of the Bible, but few realize that it took nearly a millennium to take shape, written between the 12th and 2nd centuries BCE. At that time, it was called the Tanakh, or the Hebrew Bible, and it stands as a monumental achievement in the history of religious literature. This collection of texts is the product of the Israelites and their enduring connection with their God, Yahweh. The Hebrew Bible begins with the Torah, containing foundational stories like the creation in Genesis and the covenant between God and Abraham. Tales such as Abraham's near sacrifice of Isaac, the Akedah, reflect the Israelites' devotion to Yahweh and introduce the central theme of the covenant. The Nevi'im, prophets, chronicles Israel's history from tribal unity to the reigns of Saul, David, and Solomon, and includes moral warnings from prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah. The Ketuvim, writings, adds poetry, wisdom, and narratives like Ruth's loyalty, showing Yahweh's inclusivity. Likely written during and after the Babylonian exile in the 6th century BCE, the Hebrew Bible transitioned Israel's faith from temple-based worship to scripture-based practices, preserving beliefs after the First Temple's destruction. And somewhere at this point in the story, the question arises, why were so many texts from this Old Testament erased? Was it simply more convenient? By removing these stories, the church could reframe the narrative, positioning itself as the sole mediator between humanity and the divine. But we'll get to that a little later in the video. For now, let's focus on the stories that were excluded from the official narrative of the Bible. Some of them may already be familiar to you, but it certainly won't hurt to mention them again. After all, they are the very point of this video. Several stories that were removed or completely altered in the official narrative of the Bible involve figures associated with Satan, pagan gods who were demonized, or concepts that portray the devil himself. The Old Testament, crafted over an entire millennium, vividly depicts a universe filled with divine beings that created us. You'll hear these stories now, and it's up to you to decide whether this significant piece of history needed to be erased. We're not here to impose any opinions, only to suggest that such tales wouldn't have survived through the ages, nor would we be able to discuss them today if they didn't hold some enduring value. You see, demons weren't always the evil, red creatures with horns and tails we imagine today. In the early days of Christianity, pagan gods weren't immediately demonized. Christians primarily viewed these gods as false idols, creations of human imagination and their vivid fantasies. But keep in mind, they didn't consider pagans to be non-believers, atheists, or anything like that. They saw them as people who simply believed in the wrong gods or idols instead of the one true God. Let's mention a few deities who were excluded from the original narratives, where they were still considered pagan deities. And to clarify again, it was absolutely acceptable for multiple religions to exist. Only one was deemed the true one. Take Baal, for example. Originally a god of storms and fertility, Baal was already demonized in the Hebrew Bible, portrayed as a symbol of idolatry and opposition to their supreme God, Yahweh. Over time, Baal became increasingly vilified, eventually reaching the status of one of Satan's closest companions. There were others as well, and one of the most significant was Pan, the Greek god of the wild, who had goat-like features. These characteristics heavily influenced later depictions of demons with their horns and cloven hooves. So yes, as Christianity grew and solidified its doctrines, these and various other pagan gods simply became minions of Satan. This shift was part of a broader effort to delegitimize competing religions and establish Christianity as the sole truth. By associating pagan deities with Satan, Christian leaders framed them not as harmless errors, but as actively malevolent forces leading people astray. This transformation also served to justify the destruction of pagan temples and practices, as they were now seen as hubs of demonic activity, rather than mere cultural relics. We can all agree that faith, love, and hope, the very foundations of Jesus Christ's teachings, would hardly support such a desecration of someone else's culture and traditions. Perhaps they were simply too greedy, power-hungry, or just afraid of fading away like so many before them. Known, the erased Book of Enoch. Throughout his entire book, Enoch recounts, explains, and vividly describes his numerous visions, offering an extraordinary connection between the human scribe and the divine realm. Here we will focus on one of the erased stories, the tale of the Watchers, angels who descended to earth and disrupted the divine order. Rebellious angels, fallen angels, traitors. Call them what you will. What's fascinating is that the story of these angels aligns almost perfectly with the Mesopotamian myth of the Apkallu, semi-divine beings sent by the gods to teach humanity wisdom, arts, and technology. However, much like the Watchers, they overstepped their boundaries, mingling with the human race and creating monstrous offspring in the process. Does this mean that Enoch truly had visions and saw what the earliest civilizations considered to be the truth? Someone helped us in the creation of civilizations, in teaching, in creation, in development, in evolution. Stories written in vastly different eras and regions share the same tradition. And it's these stories that were erased from the official and widely accepted version of the Bible. We understand that this might lead to one perspective, which could even upset some of you. But believe us, that's not the point. We simply want to discover if there is one truth, and if so, what it is. By the 4th century CE, the Bible as we know it was largely codified. The Old Testament was, as mentioned, based on the Hebrew Bible, and the New Testament consisted of the Gospels, Acts, Epistles, and Revelation. The main difference is that the Old Testament lacks a developed concept of the devil as a singular embodiment of evil. Instead, opposition to God's will is often attributed to human sin or external enemies. This shift wasn't just theological, it was strategic. By emphasizing the devil's role in leading souls to eternal damnation, early Christians made the stakes of salvation infinitely higher. The devil became a vivid, terrifying force, not only tempting individuals but also embodying the cosmic struggle between good and evil. The more the devil was demonized, the more Christians were urged to fear damnation, driving them to seek salvation with greater urgency. In essence, the devil's transformation into a figure of terror was less about theology and more about securing control over believers' fear and devotion. This perspective might upset some of you, and we completely understand. However, there is so much recorded and unrecorded history, so many verifiable facts, and so many alignments and misalignments that it's nearly impossible to know exactly why certain things shaped the way they did. What is clear is that history is constantly evolving. Religions influence the course of events, and yet all of these religions share numerous overlaps and similarities. There are countless erased stories, so if you're interested, leave a comment, and we'll create a whole playlist about them. We'll try to shed light on the real reasons behind the removal of these traditions from the official Bible and the consequences it has had on the entire human race. Don't forget, we live in the 21st century, and a vast amount of information is available to us, including a wealth of ancient texts and translated documents, not to mention the power of modern AI, which is key to uncovering the truth. Give yourself the space to question, grow, and discover your own path. We are still on the search, and we're grateful you're with us and haven't abandoned your curiosity. Feel free to like if you enjoyed the content, and we'll continue to earn your support with every video. Have a great one.